Hello, I'm the 10-minute English teacher. Let's get you exam ready. Today we're thinking about Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, and I'm going to be providing you with a guide, summary and analysis to the character Bob Cratchit. Before we get going, don't forget to like and subscribe. There are plenty of things on the channel to help you revise for a Christmas Carol. Okay, my guide to Bob. So we're going to start with key moments. In front of you are 6 key moments that involve Bob Cratchit. I'll walk you through them now. So we meet Bob Cratchit in stave 1. He's treated really poorly by Scrooge in a cold office, and at the end of the working day, they disappear. Bob Cratchit goes home really happily, and Scrooge disappears to have his dinner in a melancholy tavern, and then he returns to his dark home alone. So there's a clear contrast between the two characters. We then hear about Bob Cratchit in stave 2, when Scrooge is taken to see himself as an apprentice to somebody called Fezziwig, who treated Scrooge very kindly. This makes him think about Bob Cratchit. I'd like to say a word to my clerk just now. That's all, is what Scrooge says. In stave 3, the Ghost of Christmas Present takes us to Bob Cratchit's home. We go inside and see their Christmas dinner. Bob suggests a toast to the founder of the feast, Mr. Scrooge, and this casts a dark shadow on the family. They are extremely poor. They have very little, custard cup without a handle, and the family are trying to make themselves look special by adorning themselves with ribbons. But it is a very loving family nonetheless, and they are far happier than Scrooge. We then hear about Bob Cratchit and meet him again when it comes to stave 4. The Ghost of Christmas Future takes us to the Cratchit's house for a second time, and this time Tiny Tim has passed away. Bob Cratchit talks about Tiny Tim's grave, and then he sits at his bedside near the body of his son, and then returns to his family to tell them how he truly is happy and grateful to have the family that he does have. And it's a really sad and moving moment. In stave 5, Scrooge has changed and he awaits Bob's return. He is 18 minutes late for work, and Scrooge makes Bob Cratchit think he's about to be sacked, and then says that he'd like to raise his salary. And the very end of the novella is the image of Scrooge and Bob Cratchit sitting together. Bob is told to make up the fires, and they're going to talk about his salary, and Scrooge promises to support his struggling family thereafter. So those are the key moments that involve Bob Cratchit in A Christmas Carol. Okay, so this takes us to quotes to know. So the first thing is Bob Cratchit, who's kept cold in that office in the counting house where he works with Scrooge. He poked the fire and extinguished the last frail spark forever, and darkness is a motif in the novel, so we've got that idea of darkness here. Also, we've got he boasted no greatcoat, so there's a contrast made between Scrooge and Bob Cratchit. Scrooge puts on his greatcoat, and Bob Cratchit can't afford one. He's just got a comforter, which is a long scarf. Scrooge says, "You want all day tomorrow, I suppose." He is resentful of the fact that he has to pay Bob Cratchit once a year to spend time with his family and celebrate Christmas. I should just like to say a word to my clerk just now. That's all, is what Scrooge says very shortly after when he thinks about Bob Cratchit when he goes to Fezziwig's ball. So there is a change in Scrooge, and one of the first people that he starts to think about is Bob Cratchit and the way that he's been treated by Scrooge. At Bob Cratchit's house in stave 3, he has a custard cup without a handle, which signifies their poverty. It's also something that would resonate with the Victorian middle classes, who were the first middle classes to be able to afford so many commodities to fill their homes with after the Industrial Revolution. And here is Bob Cratchit with almost nothing. Bob's voice was tremulous, so this is the moment where he speaks about Tiny Tim's health, which is failing, and that's foreshadowing his later death. Ubiquitous is a word that means everywhere. His children are ubiquitous in the house. So we've got the Cratchit children excited at Christmas time. They're ubiquitous, which is worth knowing because later on they are not everywhere. They are all, as you'll find out, huddled together in a corner. So if these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die, is what the Ghost of Christmas Present says. We can, of course, link Tiny Tim to Bob, and that also explores the idea of darkness there. That's in that quote. The idea of shadows is something that is associated with Scrooge, and he needs to seek the light and redemption in the novel. Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast, is what Bob says. So he is poor, but he's also a dignified and respectful man. He acts like a gentleman there, suggesting a toast to Scrooge. Not that he's deserving of one. The noisy little Cratchit children were huddled together in one corner as still as statues, is what you'll read if you have a look at stave 4 and find the second visit to the Cratchit's house where Tiny Tim has passed away. And now they're not ubiquitous, they are all together mourning their brother. My little child is what Bob Cratchit says as he breaks down, as he speaks about Tiny Tim and his courage, and then he goes upstairs and sits by his bedside by the body of his son. It is one of the saddest moments in literature, filled with pathos, in order to influence Dickens's readers to reevaluate their attitudes towards the poor. And at the end, Bob, make up the fires and buy another coal scuttle, says Scrooge, which links back to that earlier point with the fire going out. So we've got a really nice image of Bob Cratchit and Scrooge together at the end, and Scrooge promising a warm office, which is something that signifies his change and their new renewed relationship with each other. And that takes us to analysis. So we can see Bob Cratchit as a symbol for the working poor. Negative attitudes towards the poor, the idle people, as Scrooge calls them, a challenge with the representation of Bob Cratchit. He's hardworking, dedicated to a loving family, and, as seen when he proposes a toast to Scrooge, he is a gentleman. His poverty is symbolised by his comforter, the long scarf that he wears. We've also got something to think about here when we talk about his home. There's quite a significance there. The Victorian middle classes would have been unlikely to have been inside the home of a working poor family, so Dickens takes them there when in the visits to Bob's home. We go there twice. The wealthy Victorian middle classes filled their homes with aspirational commodities like glassware and would have been moved by the contrast Dickens provides them with. All Bob has is a custard cup without a handle. And we've got that use of pathos that we can associate with Bob Cratchit. His breaking down in tears, his observing of his son's body, and his support of his grieving family are moments of pathos that are intended to make the middle-class readers reflect on inequality in society in Victorian Britain. And the contrasting outcomes for Bob Cratchit are left for the reader to reflect upon at the end. Okay, if you want to take it further, watch the video again and mute the sound. Can you talk your way through the key moments in time with the yellow marker? If you get stuck, you can unmute to hear the explanation. Can you explain the significance of each key quotation instead of me in time with them changing? Okay, check out the other videos on my channel. I'll continue to add content. Feel free to ask for something you'd like to see me cover in the comment section. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share, and keep revising.